Cynthia Allen here with Bob Ray Sanders. Thanks for joining us for Taking Sides. Bob Ray, last week was a pretty big week for the healthcare law. What happened in two federal district courts?
Well, two different things happened. One court said, hey, listen, the law is unconstitutional because exchanges established by the states are the only ones who can give subsidies to families that need subsidies. And of course, we have 8 million people who signed up for this law. But the other court said, hey, no, the state means that it means the government. It's intended that everybody who's under this law can get the subsidy. We're headed back to the Supreme Court. Actually, what we have going on here are people trying to do away with the health care law who couldn't do away with it legislatively.
Well, that's an interesting point, but I think really what's going on here is that the first court that you talked about, the D.C. District Circuit Court, that ruled that the subsidies provided by the federal government are unconstitutional, was actually reading what the law actually said, and that the intent of the folks who wrote the law in Congress was for states to set up the exchanges exclusively.
Well, we can argue about what the intent is of the law, but I think the truth is that well, you have 36 states that did not set up these exchanges, and the federal government had to do it because the states didn't do it, just like the states don't do a lot of things that the federal government has to come in and do. If you do away with this, how many people are you going to hurt?
Well, but isn't that a problem that the states are being forced by the federal government to do something? I mean, the whole point of the law was that the states should have some autonomy in this, and they should be able to make the choice. And now you're saying the federal government's supposed to tell the states this is what you have to do? Well,
the federal government comes in when the state doesn't do what it ought to do. We've seen this throughout the history of the United States. When the states, they claim states' rights, but then they mistreat people or they don't care for their people. When the federal government has to come in and step in, as it did with this law, is to make sure that people had insurance when the states wouldn't provide it, states like Texas, for example.
You said that this is going to go to the Supreme Court, and that's very likely. It looks like that's what's going to happen. But you know that the Supreme Court struck down the Medicaid provisions of the law, that the expansion, the law had initially required the states to expand their Medicaid programs, and if it didn't, it would cut off funding. The Supreme Court found that was coercive. It's very likely that it could find in this circumstance as well.
Well, but the Supreme Court has already approved this law. Now, whether or not I can't judge what the Supreme Court will do. And of course, it could go to the full district court in D.C., and they could rule that it is constitutional, and it wouldn't go to the Supreme Court necessarily.
Well, the real issue here, as far as I'm concerned, is that in normal circumstances, if a court finds something unconstitutional, the Congress goes back and changes the law. But the Congress won't do that in this particular circumstance because unlike when this law passed on a completely partisan basis in 2009, now Democrats don't have both houses, so they don't want to touch it again.
Well, and again, you're going to have people like those in the House of Representatives who will keep passing laws to declare it unconstitutional or to change it, and it's not going away. I mean, not when you have this many millions of people benefiting, many for the first time having health care insurance. It's not going away, and we should be trying to figure out a way to make sure these people stay whole, not take things away from them.
I completely agree that we should find ways to do this better, and there are Republican proposals on the tables that would do that. And so that's what I'm hopeful will happen. The Supreme Court will strike down this law, and Republicans will replace it with something that's better and bipartisan.
Republicans have nothing to replace anything with. They just hot air.
Well, we're never going to agree on that, but hopefully the Supreme Court will be able to tell us. Thanks for joining us.